let's begin the uh, topic now. Actually, we have been discussing gas dehydration in the last class, right? And then we have seen that how we can dehydrate natural gas, which is coming all the way from a separator, which is carrying around 100 of pound million per standard cube feet of gas, right? So we have seen that how we can remove the water content. Now here in this table, this is again I am showing because this is important in terms of other constituents which are present in the natural gas. So instead of water, there are other things which are present like hydrogen sulfide, mercaptan, and carbon dioxide. So all these are the acid gases which need to be removed, right? So we'll discuss in our further class the separation of these acid gases from natural gas component. But this table, as you can see, this is very important because it is telling you that what in natural gas should contain and what is the delivery pressure once it is sent to a pipeline. So this table is very important. All of you, I recommend all of you to see this and just memorize also. As we go along, we have seen that various uh, dehydration processes. So here you can see that we have seen how we can determine the water content, and then in the presence of the acid gases, how we can determine the water content. All this we have seen, various types of systems, and we have also seen the dehydration by adsorption and by absorption, right? So there are two major processes which are used to separate the water from the natural gas system. Now, today, in brief, we'll discuss the design of glycol dehydrated system, and then we'll move to the acid gas, removal of acid gases from the system. So let's begin, right? So as you can see that in glycol dehydrated design, it's a typical dehydrated design where you have the method called absorption, right? So by absorption, we separate out the water from the natural gas. So once you go and design this glycol dehydrator, you have to take care of all these 6 parameters that you are showing in the left hand side, which is the gas flow rate, specific gravity of the gas, operating pressure, and the pressure of contact between the separation time. Then you have gas inlet temperature and outlet temperature, and these two temperature actually determines the dew point depression that we want. So it is the dew point depression which will allow the water to separate, right? So it should be in a limit that water should come and separate out from the natural gas, right? So these two temperatures are very important: gas inlet temperature and outlet temperature. Now, once you talk about glycol dehydrated design, you have two different uh, criteria which need to be employed. So number one is the requirement of TEG, right? So if you want to remove water, so suppose you want to remove 1 pound of water, so you need 2 to 6 gallon of TEG. And this is basically a absorption process where the water molecules are absorbed in the glycol molecule because of special affinity towards water, right? So TEG likes water, therefore it absorbs it. Such type of material is called hygroscopic. And throughout this design, it should be considered that the glycol which we are using is not lost, right, during separation of glycol and water in the rebroiler. So we see that 99.9% of TEG will remain in the system and will not be getting out of the system, right? So first, in the beginning, you see that once the gas is coming, it should come with the inlet scrubber, right? So that the impurities can be removed. So first you have to design this inlet scrubber, then only it will go to the gas, glycol gas contractor, right? So for designing the inlet scrubber, a table is specified as shown below by Sivals in 1977. What he did, he suggested that if you want to design the inlet scrubber, the height or shell height that is to be used, which is a vertical shell height, it should be 7.5 feet height, right? And once the height is specified, the diameter has to be specified, right? So this chart, which is shown below by Siwals 1977, shows that if you know the gas capacity, that what is the gas which is coming in MMSCF per day, and if you know the operating pressure, by using this chart by Siwals, you can find out the diameter of the scrubber that is being used in the inlet, right? So in this way, the design of inlet scrubber is done. Next comes your glycol gas contactor, where the gas and glycol are flowing counter currently, right? And therefore, the separation which is occurring and taking place in the glycol contactor will depend upon the gas capacity again, right? So here, the thing is that the again it has been suggested that the standard height for glycol contactor or absorber is 7.5 feet, right? And number second point you can see here is that minimum required diameter of contactor can be determined based on the gas capacity, right? And the charts which are being suggested by Siwals again for this design of glycol gas contactor is for zero point 0.7 specific gravity of gas and a standard temperature of 100 Fahrenheit. So I'll show you the chart. This is the chart which is suggested by Siwals in 1977, where you can see that on the y axis you have gas capacity and operating pressure. However, this chart is given for a specific gravity of gas which is of zero point 0.7, and the temperature is of 100 Fahrenheit. So therefore, this is not always the case that gas which is coming in is of zero point 0.7 specific gravity and it is always at 100 Fahrenheit. So therefore, we have to do the correction, right? So correction for specific gravity and correction for temperature. So here you can see that once you do the correction, so CT is the correction for temperature and CG is the correction for gas which is employed, and Q is the gas capacity of contactor at operating condition, right? And QS is the gas capacity of the contactor for standard gas, that is zero point 0.7 specific gravity and 100 Fahrenheit. So in this way, these corrections are being done and is multiplied with QS to get the Q, right? So this CT and CQ are again dependent on the temperature, and again some charts had been suggested. So you can see this table which is on the left hand side where the temperature correction, operating temperature correction is shown. So if your temperature, operating temperature is 40 degree, then you have to multiply the correction factor 1.07 with QS, and therefore you can get the value of flow rate, gas capacity. Again, you have to do the correction for specific gravity, and whatever specific gravity you have, which is incoming gas. Therefore, for zero point 0.7, you can see we have to multiply by 1. So zero point 0.5 is 0.7 is standard one, so you have to multiply by 1. So if the gas gravity reduces, you have the correction factor is 1.14 to 1.04. And if it is higher than zero point 0.7, then the gas correction factor is 0.9, 0.3, 0.90. In this way, various gas capacity can be obtained. Once you obtain the gas capacity, which is coming to the contactor, then you have to go to the chart which is showing in the right? So on this chart, you have to again see the gas capacity and the operating pressure. And once you see these two factors, you can find out the diameter, right? So you have to go like this and at a certain operating pressure, and therefore these two will give you the diameter of the contractor to be used, right? Now next is that you have to also find out the quantity of water that is to be removed, right? So on the extreme right hand side, you see that we have an equation which shows that WR, which is water to be removed is equal to CWI minus CWO into Q that we have just calculated divided by 24. So CWI is the water content of the inlet gas, and CW is water content of the outlet gas. So these two will determine the amount of water to be removed, right? So this water content for the inlet gas can be calculated by this chart that we have seen by McCate. So in the hydration, we have seen that how we can calculate the water content. So we can find out the water content for inlet gas, and we can also find out the water content for the outlet gas based on the operating pressure and temperature. So these two value can be calculated, and water to be removed can be seen and can be calculated. So we'll do one numerical based on this, right? Now, this next comes glycol reconcentrator. So this glycol reconcentrator is nothing but the all the units which comes after the gas contactor. So you have the glycol pump system, you have the flash separator, you have the reboiler, and you have the stripping column, right? So all these are design parameter or design consideration for glycol reconcentrator. So everything is clubbed here, like reboiler, glycol circulating pump, glycol flash separator, stripping still. So these require the design which is called glycol circulation rate. So we have to first find out the glycol circulation rate, and this rate will decide the design of reboiler, design of glycol pump, glycol flash separator, and stripping column. So this can be calculated by GWR. GWR is your glycol to water ratio. So this is decided by how much water in pounds you want to remove, and based on that you have to multiply the amount of glycol that you are going to use. And CWI is the water content of inlet gas. Q, that is gas flow rate that we have just calculated in the previous slide, divided by Q. So this QG is very important term which is used to design various equipments which are used after the gas contactor, right? So the detailed design is out of the scope. You can, if you want to see it, you can see it in book by Guo that I have sent to you earlier. So detailed design is given in that. If you wish, you can see it. Okay. Now you see, you always have two type of gas contractor. One is trade glycol contractor and one is packed glycol contractor. So design criteria remains the same for both of these. However, the chart and table that is shown here will be different for packed glycol contractor. So this is also given in that textbook. You can see it. Let's move on to removal of acid gases. Now, as you know, these acid gases, which are termed as your hydrogen sulfide, you have carbon dioxide, and you have other mercaptans, which are basically these acid gases, and they are very harmful because they cause corrosion problems and very toxic, creates very toxic environment. Therefore, these need to be removed. So we'll discuss one by one. Basically, there are two type of natural gas. So one is sweet gas, which does not contain any acid gas, and one is sour gas, which is carrying these acid gases, H2S, CO2, mercaptans. So all these are termed as acid gases. So let's start with point one, that H2S and CO2 in natural gas well stream are called acid gases because they forms acids or acidic solution in presence of water, right? So once there is water, they form the acidic solutions, and which is not recommended. And also these gases do not carry any heating value, right? And therefore these heating value is not there. Therefore, in terms of end user, you can say these gases are not important, and they will allow the cost to increase during transportation. Therefore, these are not recommended, right? Now you see, this is a toxic and poisonous gas, this H2S, and cannot be tolerated in gases that may used in domestic fuels. Also, H2S in the presence of water is extremely corrosive and cause premature failure of valves, pipeline, pressure vessels. So it's highly harmful gas, you see. Most pipeline specification limit the H2S to 0.25 gram per 100 feet cube of gas, right? That is 4 ppm. So the amount of H2S in pipeline should not exceed 4 ppm. This is the limit. Also, you see that carbon dioxide is bad, but not as bad as H2S. And removal is always not required. It's based on the demand and requirement of the end user. So therefore, H2S has to be removed, but CO2 removal is should be demanded by the other party. However, once there is presence of water, CO2 is also creates a acidic environment, and its removal is required. Right. Now, point number 8, you see that most treating process that remove H2S will also remove CO2. But the selectivity of the process should be chosen, that we want to remove the CO2 or not. Just a minute. Huh? Okay. So I said that the selectivity of the process should be chosen, because if you want to remove CO2 or not depends on the selectivity of the process. So particularly see for cryogenic application, if you want to freeze your natural gas, then along with natural gas, CO2 will also get solidified and creates problem. Therefore, in that cases, CO2 must be removed. Point number 9, you see the sour gas refer to the gas containing H2S in the amount above the acceptable industry limit, right? So if suppose the accepted limit is 4 ppm, so below 4 ppm we'll say it is sweet gas, and above 4 ppm we can say it is sour gas. So it depends on the requirement of industry and limit set by the industry. Okay, let's move on. Before discussing the types of sweetening process, I must highlight that this sweetening process can be divided into two types. One is adsorption, as we have seen in dehydration also, that there is a adsorption process and there is a absorption process. So in adsorption process, we create a solid bed and will supply the gas, and gas may interact with that solid, and this H2S may be separated. So we'll discuss the adsorption process first, and then we'll discuss the absorption process. Now this absorption process is also of two type. uh, One is physical absorption and one is chemical absorption. So in physical absorption, you see that that we have seen in dehydration. um, you have a column in which the glycol is coming, and from down your gas is coming. Now this there is a physical absorption by glycol, and it absorbs the water, right? There is no kind of chemical reaction which is taking place. So such type of absorption is called physical absorption, and other type of absorption is called chemical absorption, where you have solvent and acid gases both react together and form a different compound, right? And therefore the separation is accomplished. So that is called chemical absorption. So first we'll discuss adsorption, which is called iron sponge process. So, so this process is typically selectively removing the H2S from gas or liquid stream, right? And this process is designed or for a small amount of H2S to be removed. So less, if the quantity of H2S is less than 300 ppm, then only this process is suggested. And the pressure is also low to moderate, from 50 to 500, and this process is not capable of removing CO2 at all. So this process only useful for removing H2S, and that is in a small, present in a small amount, less than 300 ppm. Now this process employ hydrated iron oxide, that is Fe2O3, right? So Fe2O3 is the hydrated iron oxide, and which is impregnated on the wooden chips. So you may have seen wooden chips. These are having high surface area, and this Fe2O3 is um, adsorbed on this wooden chips, and this is utilized for the separation process. So as you can see in the diagram, that there is a column where the wooden chips are there, and these wooden chips are impregnated by Fe2O3, that is hydrated iron oxide. Right. Now this is the process which is using ferric oxide with H2S to sweeten the gas stream, and this process is applied to gases with low H2S concentration, as I discussed, operating at low to moderate pressure. CO2 cannot be removed from this process, and you see reaction produces water and ferric sulfide. So as you can see in the right hand side, there is an equation written where Fe2O3 plus 6H2S gives ferric sulfide, and this ferric sulfide is created along with water, right? Also, it should be noted that this reaction requires slightly alkaline environment and temperature below 100 degrees centigrade. So because the temperature requirement is less than 110 degrees centigrade and the environment is to be alkaline, therefore some water need to be added from external water should be added, right? And adding the water, the objective of adding is water, that the pH should be maintained between 8 to 10, as shown in the fourth point. So we want to achieve a pH of 8 to 10, then only this process would be more effective. Now see, if the gas does not contain sufficient water vapor, water may be injected into the inlet gas stream, and bed alkalinity should be checked daily, that is, it should be 8 to 10 pH value. Now this ferric oxide is impregnated on the wooden chips which produce solid bed with large ferric oxide surface area, that is 6.5, if I say 1 grade, that is 9 pound of iron oxide per bushel. It is not written in the slide. So per bushel is a term used for this type of wooden savings, or this wooden chips, or if you want to go and buy the corn also, so this bushel is used. It's not frequently used in India, but in foreign countries it's used. So maybe it's 9 pound of iron oxide per bushel, and one bushel is equal to 36.4 liters, right? So in this way these chips are available in the market, right? Now, once this reaction is taking place between this ferrous oxide and hydrogen sulfide that is present in the gas, you have ferric sulfate which is generated along with some water. Now, this whole column need to be regenerated. Therefore, next phase is called regeneration, where Fe2S3, that is ferric sulfate, is reacted with oxygen, right? And this is oxidized to produce this sulfur, right? So you can see you have elemental sulfur which is 6S, which is produced, and this elemental sulfur is further can be treated with oxidation and uh, can be made to SO2. This step, which is a regeneration step, must be performed with a great care, right? Now why I'm saying this, this regeneration must be performed with great care, because once you add oxygen, this oxygen will create a exothermic environment, and you see we have wooden chips. So if the exothermic reaction is taking place and we are putting the oxygen at very fast rate, then what will happen, that there may be chances that it will ignite the bed, right? So we don't want that. The bed should be ignited, so the gas or oxidation process must be done very slowly during regeneration process, right? So typically it has been seen that within 10 cycles this wooden chips column should be replaced, and so that the efficiency can be maintained, otherwise the efficiency will go down, right? So this is regarding iron sponge sweetening process, and this is a typically adsorption process, right? Now next is alco alcolamine. sweetening process, where you see that you have, this is also called sometimes stripping uh, operation, right? And you see that on the right hand side, let's come to figure first, that you have two columns. One is absorption column, where the H2S present in gas, which is getting absorbed, not adsorbed, right? So there is a difference now. This is a chemical absorption process, where you see that in the first column, or first you can see this is the contactor, where uh, first separation is taking place by absorption, and there is a stripping operation. So stripping operation is nothing but it's a regeneration operation. So whatever amine we are using in this process will be regenerated in a second tower, right? So this is, therefore this is called absorption stripping operation. Absorption is a separation process, stripping is a regeneration process, right? It is also sometimes called amine scrubbing, gas sweetening, and acid removal process. Now here you see that we have various type of solution which is being used, like uh, diethanol amine, DEA, monoethylene amine, MEA, and the other compounds, right? You see. So you see that in this process, both H2S as well as CO2 are removed, right? So this is not a selective process of removing only H2S. Both H2S and CO2 can be removed in the same process, and it is common unit process used in refinery. Yes, yes. So what I am trying to say here is that it is a common unit process used in refinery, and is also used in petrochemical plants, where the H2S and CO2 both are removed, right? Now the preferably operating pressure should be high and temperature should be low to minimize the stage requirement, right? So if you want the separation to be more, right, sometimes we need more stages during absorption process. Regeneration may be one or two stages, but the stages where the absorption is taking place may be one or two. So if you keep the operating pressure very high and temperature low, then this stage requirement can be reduced, and this also decrease the solvent flow rate and lowers the equipment volume. So there is a lot of advantage keeping the operating pressure high and temperature low. So as you can see here, we have a reaction showing here that this MEA, which is monoethanol amine, which is reacting with H2S, gives you MEA hydrosulfide plus heat. So heat is generated during this process of separation, right? And you have this MEA hydrosulfide, which is generated during the reaction, which is a chemical absorption process. uh, and you see this MEA plus H2O plus CO2, along with CO2 generates MEA carbonate. So these two compounds are generated along with heat. Now this is a reaction which is taking place first tower. Now this will go to the second tower. Once the see, from the bottom you have a rich amine solution which is going to the another tower, where the separation will occur. Now what you do here is that whatever you have generated in the first column, MEA hydrosulfide and MEA carbonate, if you give heat to this MEA hydrosulfide and MEA carbonate, then again there is a regeneration process which is taking place, which is generating H2S and CO2 selectively out, right? So now the gas has been separated. So you see from first column the sweet gas which is already out, and the H2S and CO2 in the gas has reacted with amine solution and generated MEA hydrosulfide and MEA carbonate. Now these two in the second tower will react at high temperature and generate MEA again, and also generates H2S and CO2. And this can be sent to the reflux drum, where the gas which is taken, some of the MEA will be separated out and this acid gas will be taken out, right? So in this way, this process of, so alkyl amine sweetening process, and this is the process in which both CO2 and H2S are removed, right? So this is about the separation process. One that we have discussed is adsorption process, and another that we have discussed is absorption process. Now there is one more process called sulfinol process, and this is typically both a kind of chemical separation process and physical separation process, right? So this has an significant advantage that in this process both H2S and CO2 can be removed. Also, you can also remove mercaptans. But the problem and disadvantage with this process is that sometimes the heavier hydrocarbons and aromatics are also get taken away by this process, and therefore this is the disadvantage, right? So any questions?
So,
Yes.
sir, in previous slide,
This one?
it is written this one, sir. It is written that we decrease the temperature.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
See,
how we maintain such conditions?
you want to say how we can maintain this? It's a design parameter. Whatever temperature is to be maintained is fixed beforehand, right? And that is maintained in the column itself, right? But our objective should be the temperature should be maintained low enough and pressure should be high enough so that separation occur effectively, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
As you know, sir, the H2S and the CO2, also the COS, it's very important in oil industry. But if you explain to us deeply how to remove it,
Which one?
because I don't understand. I don't understand that much about how to remove H2S, CO2, and COS.
See, this process won't remove COS. However, you see that only this is a selective process of removing H2S and CO2, right? Here, there is a reaction which is taking place which generates MEA hydrosulfide and MEA carbonate. This is a chemical reaction which is taking place in first, first absorber. So this is a first tower, you can say. This is called absorber, where the lean amine, which is MEA, monoethylene amine, is coming from the top, and the sour gas, which is containing your natural gas along with H2S, CO2, and any other compounds. However, any other compound will not be separated by this process. Only H2S and CO2 are selectively taken and get reacted. Ibrahim, actually, this is the process where H2S and CO2 only are separated, right? So in the first absorber, you can see that there is a chemical reaction which is taking place between this chemical, which is called monoethylene amine, and the gas which is coming from the bottom, sour gas. So this is a counter current streams which are coming, and therefore the separation is taking place just by chemical reaction. So two compounds are generated. One is MEA hydrosulfide and MEA carbonate, right? And these two compounds are generated, but here it is this H2S and CO2 are not separated. However, it is carried away by amine, right? Now this has to go to this regenerator column where this MEA hydrosulfide along with heat will convert into H2S and CO2, right? So this is the typical process in alkylamine system. There are there are hundreds of methods available in literature for separating out the H2S and CO2. We are just discussing some simple methods and some simple terminology, right? And this sulfinol process, as we discussed in the next slide, which is having the capability of separating different components also, right?
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So keep reading,
Thank
guys.
you, sir.
Otherwise, it will be difficult to catch up, right? That is why I'm taking the test so that you may go through all the slides and lecture that we have learned till date, right?
Okay,
So
sir.
on Thursday,
Thank
be
you.
prepared for the test. Okay, don't go anyway.
we don't go anywhere. We just stay at home.
Yeah. Okay, nice
Okay.
meeting you guys. Bye.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, bye.